Sahana vavatu sahano bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavaditam astoma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great strength and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. This evening's talk is really around the Katha Upanishad. Instead of having this on Saturday with the Christmas period, I thought it much more relevant to give a talk on Saturday, which happens to be Christmas Day, more in line with the significance of Christmas. So I'm going to start off really with a peculiar theme because today is a very special day. It is in fact the winter solstice. The very ancient monument, which is here in Ireland, some 5,000 years old, called Newgrange. And it's a Neolithic structure comprising very, very heavy stones put in a line like pillars with flat stones laid on the top and the whole mound filled with earth. Several thousands of tons of material there, most of it gathered about 20 kilometers from the site. And the dome arranged in such a way that overlapping rocks make sure it is stable, as I say, for 5,000 years and more. And you wonder what inspired people to do such a thing. And although all the rocks came from about 20 kilometers away, the facing of it is quartz. And the quartz rocks comes from the Wicklow Mountains. It's a much greater distance. What inspires the whole of humanity to assemble such energy and effort and organization to do this is still a puzzle. Because at the end of this passage there are two chambers and remnants of bones were found there. But what kind of ritual, what kind of mindset did these people have? The only thing that we know is the front of it is arranged like a window. And exactly on this day, at the winter solstice, the rising sun rays penetrate and it goes along a rising gradient designed to catch the rays of the sun at the winter solstice to the end. And when it was built, it went right to the end of the passage. And nowadays, of course, with the slight difference in angle, it doesn't go all the way there. So we can simulate it with a light. How ancient people decided to align this with the sun. And it reminds me of a story from Plato, the great philosopher, Greek philosopher. He puts prisoners in a cave, and there's a fire behind these. They can only face in one direction on the cave wall. And all the figures behind them appear to them as shadows in front. Their whole world is a shadow world. Shadows operating and moving limbs and so on. They can't see anything else. One person who is a bit more curious and wiser decides to look along the passage. In other words, find another direction. And there he sees a small point of light. And he's able to exit the cave. And in exiting the cave, of course, he goes into a state of liberation. This is Plato's way of asserting a passage in the Katha Upanishad. It's well known from the previous passage that this internal entity that we call this fundamental self, this witnessing entity, is very subtle. Normally it's hidden. Bhagavad Gita gives us a number of examples of something that can be existing and yet hidden. For example, the fetus can be hidden by the womb. The fire can be hidden by smoke. Sun can be hidden by a cloud. It's not that the cloud is absent, that the sun is absent. But the impression, the appearance, is very much like Plato's cave, where we just see a shadow world, and we happily operate within this. And this sense of prisonhood can be really deemed as ignorance. It's not a kind of insult to say we are ignorant fellows, non-intellectual, we don't know anything, we're crude, not that kind of thing. It's just that we are mistaken. We have taken the external world and we have constructed a strategy that enables our survival in it. Thinking that our strategy, thinking that our formula is arranged for long-term happiness, long-term satisfaction, we set up an operation. We can call it I Incorporated. And we move about from there. But there's something deeper. There is a light beyond the shadows, if we were only to see it. The Katha Upanishad puts it in a very peculiar way, but gives a kind of commentary, a kind of introduction. It tells us what I've just said, that it has been stated, that he, that is, that life entity within, is hidden in all beings, not just in humans, but all beings, all things that exhibit some vestige of life, and also those things which seem lifeless. A rock, for example, seems lifeless, but we know by atomic investigation that it is teeming with activity. All the atoms are arranged in a specific way, aligned, and consolidated to make a solid rock. What seems to be a solid rock, what on careful analysis is pure space. But the eye is deceived. The sense of hardness that we feel against the skin deceives us. And yet it is relatively real, and we have no other choice but to operate within it. And the previous passage has used the parable or the analogy of a chariot, saying that the horses are like the senses. So these are two types of things. These are a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it is hiding. It is constricting us, making us kind of prisoners, or that's how we feel. We feel bound. Even though we are free, we have to explain why do we get the impression that we are bound. And then the necessity of freeing ourselves. So that's on the one side. On the other side, we see that the instruments, namely the horses, are useful to us. Without the horses, the chariot doesn't move. So technically, all these appendages are called upadis. Upadi means, unfortunately translated as limiting adjunct. Yes, it's limiting the full glory of the divine self within, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a manifesting adapter. Something like the electrical current. You find a light bulb, when you link it to electrical current and connect it, it not only hides the vastness of the electricity and the electrical current behind it in the electromagnetic field, but it manifests also as light. And there are these two aspects of it. So it says, hence he does not appear as the self of all, but he is seen through a pointed and fine intellect. How do we refine the intellect? Several factors are necessary. Discipline is necessary. A certain alignment, a certain rhythm, a certain transforming status of our energy. Our energy, normally dissipated in many different ways, including and especially our psychic energy, has to be gathered up, consolidated, and projected in a specific way so that it becomes a revealing thing. Something like a spotlight. We can see things because the rays of sunshine, the rays of light are dissipated. So we have a wide range of vision. When you gather all that together and beam it in one direction, we have a laser beam capable of cutting through steel. Very powerful. So the mind can also be razor sharp. Like walking on the edge of a razor, says the previous passage, if you remember. Starting off from that, Utishtata Jagrata Pratyavaran Nibodhita, that Swami Vivekananda translates beautifully as arise, awake, don't stop until the goal is reached. Listen to those who are wise, those who've taken a different journey, those who now, instead of looking outside, start looking inside. And those wise ones, having listened to them, be careful, because although it's open to all of us have the capacity to discover what is already there. The light in the cave analogy that Plato gives is already there. But we see it as mere shadows, and that imprisons us. We get our freedom by seeing a more truthful, a wider, more subtle perspective. But we have to get away from the shadow vision first. And the shadow vision is represented by the outside world. Naturally, the senses move toward it. So consciousness, which is our birthright, is flowing out through the senses. It's as if we have a house and all these windows are there to the external world. And because we are attracted by that, we ignore the internal contents. Some people ask, why is today increasingly secular, less spiritual? Well, the answer is there's more entertainment. The senses are moving more easily outside. And that is catching them in the state of ignorance, making us less intelligent. No doubt, more technically astute, more intelligent in that sense, but less intelligent from the point of view of inner wisdom, finding out the fundamental reality which is inside us. So, what again, says the commentator, is the obstacle to this pointed intellect, because of which there is an absence of that intellect and the self is not seen? I've mentioned the disciplinary aspect of it. But then there has to be also some other things. Love has to be there. These noble qualities have to be there. And sharpening the intellect means having the capacity or using the capacity to concentrate. Concentration is the key to everything. Gathering up the scatteredness and putting it in one direction, called ekagra, one-pointedness. So the commentator goes on, this canto is begun to show the cause of that non-perception. Why should we perceive things in a different way? Why should we not perceive them as they are? And the reason is because the perceiver can never be perceived. The seer can never be seen. The knower can never be known. Otherwise, you require another causal agent. You've created another object. There must be some eternal subject somewhere. And so it's begun to show this non-perception, for only when the cause of this can be established, the cause that bars the good, only when this is known, can any effort be made to remove it, and not otherwise. When we find out what's in the way, then we can handle it. One thing's for sure, any so-called obstacle in the way, we can't attack it. We can't crash into it. We'll only hurt ourselves by doing that. We have to find a way around it. We won't deny the usefulness of the senses, but why not use the senses? And why not then take all of that consciousness normally flowing out through all these avenues and windows? Why don't we actually reverse it? And any perception comes on the skin. Nowadays we have found out that through the study of epigenetics, that if you take a single cell with a nucleus, you can extract the nucleus and put it in a petri dish, seemingly the architect of all our life, containing all our potential, whatever we have been, whatever we are now, whatever will be in the future, is contained in this information. A kind of encoded structure that is so condensed, so neatly arranged. It is called deoxyribonucleic acid. It's made from nucleic acids. It contains over 100,000 coded messages. And yet, if you extract it from the cell, if you take it out of its internal environment and put it in a petri dish suitable for growth and expression, it doesn't do anything. It lies dormant. It requires all the other components of the cell to make it work. Then what is the source of the information that comes and gets fed to it? What is the source of its reaction? We are just a coordination of all these thousands and thousands and billions of cells, all deciding to work in a glorious cooperative effort, and you call that the physical body. But there are cells that work by themselves without having any cooperation and teamwork with anything else. Regardless of what it is, the information gathering is on the external layer, the membrane of the cell. All the sources of information come from the external cell, from the external skin, if you will. And then all the outgoing movement goes through that same avenue. It's such a wonderfully complex and well-designed structure. It's no wonder that we use this idea of intelligent design. Intelligent design, of course, as an argument, has a flaw, number of flaws. But as a principle, in explaining, in seeing what we see, there's no doubt that there is a meaningful structure that is put that does not seem to be randomly displayed or randomly assembled. This wonderfully complex membrane, this is the senses, this is the sense, it senses. What does it sense? It senses the external environment and then it selects. It selects the enzymes, for example, that it wants, and then a complex filtering mechanism that disallows what it doesn't want and only allows what it wants, and relays that to the protein structure, the informed and informational side of things, the DNA. And then there is a movement outward. This is what we should do. Action and reaction. Let us take the human body as a total organism. It has the same arrangement. The eyes are not on the inside. The eyes are on the outside of the skin. The nose is on the outside of the skin. The ears are part of the skin. They're all part of the membrane, the external skin. It's just a giant version of a single cell. And so it's as if openings have been pierced through the skin. And that's how we register the external world. Look at this wonderful, beautiful passage that is put before us. It says, Paranshi Kani Yandrat Swayambus Tasmat Param Pasyati Nantaratman. The self is not to be sought through the senses. You get many people, and when we say self, we're talking of the fundamental self, that ultimate datum within that is hidden normally from us. And yet with its presence, because of its presence, everything else operates. Just as in the winter solstice, the sun is responsible for the small light that opens up in the passage. We register it to the glory of the sun. The ancient people must have had some kind of internal movement about that. They must have thought, what a wonderful glory it is. The announcement really of a kind of new shift, a new opportunity, some difference. All these solstices celebrated, summer solstice, winter solstice, and then the intermediate solstices are there. They knew the celestial arrangement. They knew how the earth works. They knew how the sun and the earth coordinate together. They also knew the movement of the stars. It's often a wonder when I look into the sky and see the sunrise or sunset, that thousands and thousands of years ago, when these Upanishads were discovered and when they were relayed through word of mouth in particular stanza form, that they were seeing the same sun, they were seeing the same moon, the same celestial bodies, They experienced the same air. They tasted the same water. They felt the same sandy soils. They saw the same leaves, thousands and thousands of years old. And Newgrange, 5,000 years ago, understood this arrangement. We don't know why. We don't know what they made of it. But one thing we do know, they had a scientific understanding about it. And they also had the engineering knowledge to assemble such a wonderful structure, putting a facade of quartz, shining quartz, so that the sun actually bounces its light and reflects its light off this quartz. What ingenuity they had in order to mine the stone, carve the stone, transport the stone, build the stone. What cooperative effort, as I say, was necessary. And all because they saw some inner meaning in nature. In this same way, we have to discover the inwardness of things. So the passage says, not only this self, but it is put in this way. It is self-existent. There is a self-existent entity that lords it over everything else. Self-existent is not caused by any other thing. It doesn't require another explanation why and what made this. Today we find this argument, you see, that please give us evidence for this thing, and we can put it in theological terms called God. Thinking that God is an extra cosmic entity outside, not thinking that whatever is inside. A foolish question is asked. The senses cannot perceive this. No. You can't catch it with the senses. The senses, the self cannot be sought through them, and the self pierced the opening of the senses outward. Uses that expression. It itself causes the outward movement. Why should we see the outside world and not see this hidden entity? Because the self-existent one has pierced it, has arranged these openings through the external part of the skin to catch the external world. Don't ask why it does it. Self-existent did it. And itself has no cause. It's the uncaused cause. You can't ask what created it and go on ad infinitum. It's self-existent and self-caused. It's self-effulgent. That shining, all things shine. Don't look for another thing. Then we have an infinite regress. So it's making these senses so that we can catch this world outward. Therefore, it says, one looks outward. That's why we look outward. That's why we don't look within. Some wise person decides, no. Let me stay the flow outward, and let me use this, and let me look inside. Now, of course, physiology and anatomy is well known, but there was a development also, fairly recent in the West, called psychology. Very ancient in the East, but fairly modern in the West, psychology. Let us make a science of studying the mind. So when you ask now, who was the most ancient psychologist in the world? People immediately, I've asked this question, they go to Adler or Jung or Freud. Some clever people, seeing my look of non-agreement, say, oh, Buddha. But you see, in the Bhagavad Gita, we find the most ancient psychologist practicing, where Arjuna is suffering from nervous breakdown, and he's dealing with him, and he doesn't say, come, my dear fellow, please lie on this couch in the middle of the battlefield and tell me all about your unfortunate childhood. He doesn't do it. It ignores that whole history and says, if you really want to understand your history and dive deep within, and there you'll find this self-caused, self-existent self. And you need to express that. And the same passage ahead of this tells us the same. Stand up and be strong. Wake up. Stop looking at the shadows. Wake up. Arise. And Swami Vivekananda adds a determinative faculty. Be determined, don't stop until the goal is reached. Have a penetrating vision, have persistence, have patience, have purity of mind. He puts these 3 P's before us. We do this. Sharpen the intellect. The passage goes on, like treading on the edge of a razor. And we all know this statement, this saying. He had a razor-sharp intellect. Sharpen the intellect. Don't allow all your mental capacity to be dissipated in being scattered here and there. Very often people who come with a difficulty in stress and all the rest of it, nervous tension and so on and so forth, they expect me to give them some spiritual counseling. I give them time management instead. I tell them, come on. There's time that is presented before you. And if you're worrying about all the things in the past, and you're anxious about all the things that may or may not happen in the future, you're missing this current moment in which you can put something useful in and make minutes the currency of your activity and seconds the currency of your thought. And deal only with this moment. Don't think I have 100,000 things to do. Only think I have one thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. Because if you go either side of this timeline, you're missing this current moment and the glory that's presented with it. This self-existent entity, which is here and is now. So a wise person, knowing that, will take all their attention and dive deep inside. And so that says it, the self-existent Lord almost destroyed the outgoing senses, destroyed the faculty so that they, in other words, tainted them so that all we can see is the outside. In that sense, yes. On the other side, the example given in this Katha Upanishad is that the horses are there representing the senses, and they are useful to us. On the one side, they are destroying our vision. On the other side, they're exhibiting and manifesting the glory, just like any manifesting adapter, which also can have its faculty or its function as a limiting adjunct. So in its limiting sense, we can say it's destroyed. Therefore, one sees the outer things and not the inner self. It also says that this wise person is rare. A rare, discriminating man means person. And why should they look inside? Because they only have one desire, immortality. Immortality is what it is. Amritatvam icham, desiring this immortality. We don't think that we want to live forever until somebody says, let me cut your life short now. Or until we say, okay, we have a sickness today in the COVID crisis. This reality has hit more people than usual. In times of war, we find it as well. One of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century is how thousands and thousands and thousands of young lives were wasted in a maneuver that never worked because those who are not involved in the trench warfare, who were operating the battlefield from a distance in a boardroom somewhere, decided that these lives should be used like cannon fodder. What a tragedy. In times like these, people turn to religion, it's noticed. Statistically, it's noticed. We can work both ways. We can say, God abandoned us in these times. Until the realization comes, no, it's not the Lord's fault. He gives you all the capacity to be sensible and wise. Why don't you use it? And so, in a desperation, people turn to some power that they feel is higher than their own, since the human faculties are unable, because of their limitations, to deal with the difficulties. So, it requires the rarity of discernment, discrimination, to say, this formula that is outgoing is not working for me. It is not giving me the satisfaction I require. It's not giving me this happiness. And it's certainly doing nothing to overcome this question of death. And hearing that, thinks that there is an immortality somewhere. What will I do? I will desire this immortal state. Let me live eternally, since I'm under the delusion that physically I'll do it anyway. No. Anything physical, anything assembled from parts, is going to disassemble. It's going to disintegrate. That's the fact of it. With that in mind, let me look for something that does not disintegrate. Something that is not hooked up in the causal chain of things. Something that is not within the small framework of time and space. Let me look for that. So some wise men seeking life eternal, with eyes, as it were, turned inward, taking an internal vision now, looking then at the psychology of things, looking at the mind itself, then going beyond the mind. And previous passage we found a hierarchy, very useful to us. That the sense objects are higher than the organs, since the organs are designed to reveal them. And that the mind is higher than that, the intellect is higher than that. And then the Mahat, the great cosmic mind, is higher than that. And then the unformed, the unmanifest is higher than that. And higher than that is what is described as Purusha. And there's nothing higher than the Purusha, says the passage. This step-by-step hierarchy is useful. We can view it not only as a higher hierarchy, but an inward movement that consists of uncovering layer after layer after layer of our vision, from the external to the more internal, to the more subtle, until we catch something that is self-existent, that is self-shining. So turns his eyes away and then sees the indwelling self. There's a wonderful poem by the famous poet Coleridge. It were a vain endeavor, though I should gaze forever on that green light which lingers in the west. I may not hope from outward forms to win the passion and the life whose fountain are within. So this profound realization that it is all from within. So this Upanishad is pointing out that what we call that innermost self, what religion calls God, is more manifest in the soul of man than in the world outside. And it therefore demands a conversion of the spirit, a change of heart, and more inward direction on itself. The commentary goes on, and it's a fairly short commentary, being fairly self-explanatory. It says that indwelling self, that is one's own reality, one aikshat, that is one knowing wise person, saw, that is sees, for in the Vedas there is no regularity about the tenses it mentions. So anyway, how one sees is being stated. How do we do it? It is to take the eyes normally moving toward the outside objects, and we have to see what is inside. There is always a seer somewhere. And as we mentioned probably in last talk I gave, there is a seer of the sense organs. That's called the mind. But we can also watch all the activities of the mind. When we do this in a dedicated way, it's called meditation. Meditation is the process of going from the outside to the inside, and going back from the inside to the outside, and repeating the process, taking an inward passage, using a convenient script, a kind of inward commentary. Come on, let's take a journey, using memories that are delightful. And therefore, the inner eye will catch the forms of these memories. And with a creative sense of imagination, we can steer this mind inward to a point of self-discovery. The unintelligent people, that comprises most of humanity. It sounds a little insulting, but it's factual. Because if we were really wise and fully intelligent, then we would follow this process. So the unintelligent people who don't do this, what do? They follow the external desires. You can imagine, you see, every animal, let's just say, birds or animals of prey, seeking out something to eat and following it, hunting it down. In this same way, we take desires and follow it. We become stalkers. We follow the desire until we catch it. And once we consume it, it's gone. And it's always short term. You ask a child, what is your most delightful thing? What do you think heaven is like? They'll say, maybe, ice cream, all the time. All right. Supposing you are able to fulfill this desire and bring 1 ton of ice cream, after a few spoonfuls, the child will get fed up. I'm sorry, my tummy doesn't feel so well now. Please give me something else. Now, there's no difference. It's only that we have learned to follow the objects of the senses, and feeling that this will create some fulfillment is called desire. So following this, we get entangled in the snares, the traps, that is, of the widespread death, because everything that we touch does not turn to gold. It perishes. Investing in this perishable universe, we carry on in a false strategy, something like Plato's being enamored with the shadows on the wall. Therefore, the discriminating people, those who have discernment. Now, this faculty of discernment is something that we need to cultivate. We need to examine carefully what we are doing until it becomes habitual. When you first drove a car, you had to carefully think where the pedals were, carefully think where the gears were, carefully look at all the mirrors, front and center and sides. You had to learn to maneuver brake, clutch, accelerator, all simultaneously in a manual car. Now, when you drive a car, you hardly think of those things. Now, when you drive a car, it's gone into the habit level. Automatically, you make the adjustment. The car goes off to the left. Without your awareness even, you make the automatic adjustment. And you have the opportunity of employing a sense of spatial awareness, calculation, always calculating the space between cars or the distance, judging, can I overtake, or will I have to stay behind a little bit? Will I have to dim my lights? All these quick decisions are made almost spontaneously. If you're careful, you can be aware of some of them, but largely they're all in the automatic system of your brain. You can put it that way. You're running on autopilot. It's the same with any learned behavior. When it is repeated, it becomes part of our habit level. So to learn to discern step by step is difficult in the first place. We have to be acutely and astutely aware of what's happening. But then, ultimately, through practice, it becomes automatic. In devotional life, people ask, how can we practice the presence of God? It's a question. There's, of course, the famous book, a series of books, The Pilgrim's Way, asking this question. The Christian texts are telling, see, how St. Paul has told, pray without ceasing, and they wonder, how can we possibly do it? How can we tune our attention constantly into the divine when we have so many activities in the day and concerns, domestic, family, health, finance, political, social, all these crowd in for our attention? How can we possibly register the divine in the midst of all this milieu of activity? It's a key question often asked. But here it is, through practice. what we call technically in yoga, see, abhyasa yoga, constant practice, bringing the attention back, constantly bringing the attention back. Once we do that, we can say we are a discerning, discriminating person. And it is this discriminating person, having known what true immortality is, having made that understanding, in the midst of all the impermanent things. They don't pray for anything here. Give me this, give me that. Give me wealth, give me abundance, give me increasing health. In this time, in this Christmas season, it's very common to wish people not only a happy Christmas and so on, but also a prosperous new year. You can add, may you have abundant wealth, may you have abundant health, and so on and so forth. A person who is discerning like this will not even think like that. When Swami Vivekananda came upon his hardest times, after his father died and he didn't have any access to wealth or anything like that, father leaving the whole family in debt, what did he do? Couldn't find a job anywhere, fell into a state of despair. Even in the midst of this, you see, feeling that Ramakrishna, his master, would be able to make a prayer on his part. He not believing in the Mother Kali. Please, I know you have this connection. See, like this center of influence. Like, we want a visa, so we maybe catch somebody who is influential. Well, you're influential, you're mates with the highest authority.
The diplomatic corps.
Yeah. So please go and ask. Ramakrishna says, I can't do it. I'm not accustomed to ask for things. Because Ramakrishna's point of view was, I'm not investing in the impermanent world. There's no permanence in it. You go and ask. And of course, we know well that after 3 attempts, Vivekananda could not do it. And wound up saying, oh, I did ask for something. What was it? Pure devotion, pure love, and discrimination. Pure love of God, those kinds of things. Things which are intangible, and yet are the innermost treasures. That he could ask for. So, the small-minded, they go after the outward pleasure. Parachaha kaman anuyanti balaste mritya yanti vitasya pasham. Atta now, dira amritavam viditva dhruvam adhruveshu iha na prarata yanti. The small-minded go after these outward pleasures. But those who have a discerning faculty, they won't do it. They can't do it. So the commentary says, now the natural tendency to perceive outwardly, which has been now explained why that is, the things that are not the self, the cause of the obstructions of the vision of the self. And that is really classified as ignorance. That's the definition. Ignorance is not the non-possession of a university degree or a diploma. No, not in that sense. That is all part of the ignorance. Setting short-term goals that are useful, no doubt, in the short term, but not addressing the fundamental questions of permanency. So the obstruction of the vision of the self, and it is the ignorance, since it is opposed to that, that is what? A vision. And there is that thirst for the enjoyment of those very outer things, whether seen or unseen, which are presented by ignorance. Those whose vision of the self is obstructed by these 2 things, what are they? Ignorance and thirst. That's what it amounts to. And thirst comes from the ignorance. So having these thirst and this ignorance, those balaha, those men of little intelligence, Anuyanti, they follow only this charachaha kaman, this external desirable things. Because of that reason, they get entangled. It's like binding yourself. It's like going through a jungle and getting caught up by the vines. and struggling, and the more you struggle, the more you get entangled. Like that. In these various snares, those by which one is bound, consisting in the association with or dissociation from the body senses. That's what it amounts to. That primary lack of discrimination is saying, I am the body. I'm the body and the mind. You know, we do this Enneagram, and in that, that's the primary thrust of it, is to see if you can detach from what is overall called a mask, consisting of a mind and its physical expression, the body, and the two combined, we say, that is I, that's me. And you take ownership of the vehicle, of the vehicular self, of the instrumental self. That is the difficulty. That is the primary difficulty. Those people who are able to detach that, those people who are able to make a distinction, no, I am the seer, I am the knower, I am the thinker. And these are all instrumental things. These are all vehicles for a purpose. They're useful, like a chariot or a car. Yes, it's useful. We can go places with it. But I always keep in mind that the inner self is the self-existent, the uncaused cause of everything. So it goes on to say these things. Then, what remains here unknowable to this self, through which very self people perceive color, taste, smell, sound, touch, and also sexual pleasures. This is that, and this is what? But this is the self that is asked for by Nachiketa. Don't forget, this refers to the original question that Nachiketa wants to ask. So we have this wonderful hymn also that illustrates this point. And since we have a Christian festival in our midst, we can quote from it. Swift to its close ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me. What a beautiful hymn. And you, as I'm repeating it, you may know the tune to it. So it's called Abide with Me overall. That's how it is. So in every tradition, you have these discerning entities who catch this inner truth, at least in a glimpse, and then deepen it so that it becomes familiar territory to us. So yena rupam, rasam, gandham, that by which one perceives what? Color. We only, color also form, because it's, you see, it's rupam. Rupam, literally form, but also the way we distinguish what is things have different color also. In other words, everything registered by the eye is in the form. And the distinguishing factor will be what the eye catches and registers. It has senses that register different colors, unless, of course, some people are colorblind as well. So everybody registers, normally speaking, yellow and blue and green and all the different colors that are available to us in the visible spectrum. So we can perceive these. And then there is taste. This is how we know what is there. And we have smell, the faculty of smell, sounds, touches. These all we like. They are done by that alone, that one that perceives from inside, not from the outside. What is there that remains unknown? And truly this comes itadvaitat. And repeatedly it says itadvaitat. That is, this truly is that. This truly is that. So everything is known by that internal self. We have to repeat it time and time and time again until it becomes our second nature, our automatic understanding. In that way, we can now drive our car with confidence, with control. Prior to that, it's all uncontrolled. So that self, there is nothing which is unknowable to it. It is the supreme knower. Sarvam evatmatmanma vijnaneyam yasyatmano vijneyam na kinchit parishyasati sa atma sarvajnana. This Shankaracharya says, though the self is not manifest as an object, it is ever present in all experience as the subject. It is the ground of every possibility of thought, of every act of knowledge. And further we can say that when we systematically withdraw all our consciousness from the outside to the inside, even for a moment, even just experimentally, we find a point of poise. And all our sorrows disappear. They may come back, of course, once consciousness goes back to the outside world. But during that moment, it is all peace. And when it's withdrawn completely to a state of deep sleep, we say, we had a peaceful sleep. Why? Because the consciousness wasn't being expressed through the senses. It is expressed through the senses in a wonderfully creative way in dream. But it's all internal. And when it goes toward the outside, it gives us the biggest problems. How should we deal with our unhappiness and grief? Well, the consciousness, as I say, that is normally flowing through the sense organs toward the objects. It's the objects that are causing the difficulty. Then the solution is very easy. We do a reversal. We withdraw all of that through a systematic and scientific process until we stand poised. That by which one perceives both dream states, therefore, and waking states, having known that as the great omnipresent self. Then what happens? Well, the wise person doesn't grieve. That's the fact of it. Swapnantam jagatadantam gobao yenana pashyati mahantam vibhum atmanam matva dhiro na shochati. Does not grieve. So this is a very important passage from this section, the first stanza to the fourth in this new section. And so with that we leave that off. So just to repeat, having realized that great and all-pervading internal self, through which a person perceives, through which we perceive things because of its presence. Perceives what? Perceives the objects not only in the waking state, but also in sleep, and also, as I say, the waking states. Then the person who understands that is the wise person, does not grieve. It's a very different understanding of intelligence, very different understanding of wisdom. You can have intelligent people who are relating everything to the external world in the realm, let's say, of material wealth and science also. But you see, intelligent people have also devised a bomb that is capable of blowing up whole cities in nuclear warfare. Maybe some intelligent people researching things managed to manufacture a certain virus. I don't know. Maybe intelligent people have decided that they will try to capture land, thinking it's their own, developing highly sophisticated warfare that can be used at great distances with pinpoint accuracy. Maybe intelligent people have decided that the most convenient thing for our own facility and convenience is something that we can take from the earth and through certain manufacturing chemical processes make it malleable enough, and we call it plastic, and distribute it throughout the entire planet so that fish can swallow it and destroy the whole environment. Maybe intelligent people can do this, but I think you'll find there's not much wisdom within it. All compassion for that moment. And part of the wisdom is the compassion. So with these few words, we'll end off. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. And if we don't see you before Christmas, happy and Christmas. And May you also have all the prosperity that I was denying you previously. And so may you all be well. Julian of Norwich had this wonderful statement. What is it? All will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. And with these blessings, I wish you all well. Thank you.